The giant space station called Nexus Prime was buzzing with angry voices and flashing lights. This wasn't just any regular meeting. This was an emergency gathering of the most powerful alien races in the galaxy, and they were all talking about one thing: humans. Admiral Vexkara stood at the center of the circular room, his green, scaly skin gleaming under the bright lights. He was from the Zenthan Empire, a race of lizard-like warriors who had conquered dozens of star systems. His yellow eyes burned with fury as he stared at the holographic map floating in front of him. Red dots marked human colonies. And there were way too many of them for his liking. "Look at this!" he shouted, his voice echoing off the metal walls. His clawed hand swept across the display, pointing at cluster after cluster of human settlements. These Earth creatures are spreading everywhere like some kind of disease. Just this year alone, they've built 17 new colonies. 17, at this rate they'll be knocking on our doorsteps within a decade. The other alien leaders murmured among themselves, their various forms of communication creating a strange symphony of sounds. Some clicked, others hummed, and a few made noises that sounded like grinding metal. From across the room, a tall, crystalline figure stepped forward. Prime Resonator Thulvar looked like she was made entirely of living glass, her body catching and reflecting the room's lights in beautiful patterns. When she spoke, her voice sounded like wind chimes in a gentle breeze, but her words were anything but peaceful. "The Admiral speaks truth," she said, her crystal body pulsing with different colors as she talked. "We have studied their ships, their weapons, their cities. By our standards, their technology should be laughably primitive. Their ships are smaller than ours, their weapons seem weaker, and their armor looks thin. Yet somehow they manage to build colonies faster than we can count them. How is this possible?" Near the back of the room, something that looked like a giant praying mantis raised one of her sharp arms. This was Hive Commander Rixtol, leader of the insect collective. Her species communicated mostly through clicking sounds made by rubbing and their limbs together, but she had learned to speak the common galactic language for meetings like this. "Analysis suggests immediate action," she clicked, her compound eyes reflecting the room like 1,000 tiny mirrors. "Waiting allows growth. Growth leads to strength. Strength leads to resistance. Better to eliminate threat while still manageable." The room erupted into chaos as different species began arguing with each other. The Zenthan representatives roared their approval of military action. The crystal beings chimed their concerns about rushing into war. The insect collective clicked rapidly among themselves, probably calculating battle odds and casualty estimates. Admiral Vexkara slammed his fist on the table again, causing several smaller alien delegates to jump in surprise. "Enough!" he bellowed. "We've been watching these humans for 50 of their years. 50 years of them slowly creeping across our galaxy, taking planets that should belong to us, mining resources that we need for our own empires." He activated another hologram, this one showing Earth itself, a small blue and green planet orbiting, an unremarkable yellow star. "This is their homeworld, one planet. We represent over 1,000 different worlds, with fleets that could block out their sun. They should be begging us for permission to exist, not expanding like they own the Gi galaxy." The debate continued for hours. Some aliens wanted to send warnings first. Others suggested economic sanctions or trade blockades. But the majority seemed to agree with Admiral Vexkara's aggressive approach. Finally, after what felt like endless arguing, they put it to a vote. The decision was unanimous. Earth would receive an ultimatum. They had one galactic standard week to abandon every single colony beyond their home solar system, or face the combined military might of the Galactic Council. As the meeting ended, and the various alien representatives began filing out, many of them felt satisfied with their decision. After all, what could one small species from one insignificant planet possibly do against the combined power of 1,000 worlds? The humans would surely see reason and submit to their demands. None of them noticed the small, almost invisible probe that had been quietly recording everything from the shadows of the space station's hull. Ambassador Park Hyun-woo was having his morning coffee when the message arrived. He was sitting in his private quarters aboard the UES Harmony, a sleek diplomatic ship that had been his home for the past 3 years. The ship wasn't built for war. It was designed for peace talks, trade negotiations and cultural exchanges. But today it was about to receive the most important message in human history. The communication alert chimed softly, and Hyun-woo set down his cup. He had been expecting this. Earth's intelligence network had been tracking the Galactic Council's emergency meeting for days. They knew what was coming. Lieutenant Kim So-young rushed into the room, her face flushed with excitement and worry. She was young, maybe 25, and this was her first deep space assignment. Her hands trembled slightly as she handed him the data pad containing the alien message. "Sir, it's from the Galactic Council," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "It's marked as an official ultimatum." Hyun-woo nodded calmly and took the pad. As he read the message, his expression didn't change at all. Years of diplomatic training had taught him to never show his true feelings, especially when dealing with hostile alien races. But inside, he felt a mixture of anger and amusement. "Let me guess," he said without looking up from the pad. "They want us to abandon all our colonies and stay locked in our home system like good little humans." Kim So-young blinked in surprise. "How did you know?" "Because aliens always underestimate us," Hyun-woo replied with a small smile. "They see our ships and think they're weak. They look at our weapons and think they're primitive. They count our colonies and think we're spreading too fast. But they never bother to ask the most important question." "What question, sir?" "Why we're so confident." Hyun-woo stood up and walked to the main communication console. The bridge crew looked nervous as he approached. They had all heard rumors about what the Galactic Council was planning, and everyone knew that 17 human colonies were home to millions of people. Abandoning them wasn't just impossible, it was unthinkable. "Open a channel to Nexus Prime," Hyun-woo ordered. "Full diplomatic protocols." The communication officer, a middle-aged man named Sergeant Lee Dong-min, hesitated. "Sir, are you sure? If we respond too quickly, they might think we're desperate." "Trust me, Sergeant. Open the channel." Miandipasi. Within minutes, the main screen flickered to life, showing the interior of the Galactic Council chamber. Hundreds of alien faces stared back at them, scaled reptilian features, crystalline beings that reflected light like living prisms, insect-like, creatures with compound eyes, and dozens of other species that defied easy description. Admiral Vexakara stepped forward, his yellow eyes gleaming with satisfaction. He probably thought the humans were about to surrender immediately. Hyun-woo straightened his uniform and stepped into view of the camera. His voice was perfectly calm and respectful when he spoke. "Honored members of the Galactic Council," he began, giving a small bow. "Earth has received your message and acknowledges your concerns about our colonial expansion." Several aliens leaned forward, expecting to hear humanity's surrender. "However," Hyun-woo continued, "such an important decision requires careful consideration and consultation with our leadership. Therefore, Earth's formal response will be delivered in exactly 72 standard hours." The reaction was immediate and explosive. Alien delegates began chattering, clicking, and roaring among themselves. Many of them seemed genuinely shocked that the humans hadn't immediately agreed to their demands. Admiral Vexkara's scaled face twisted into what might have been a smile on a human, but looked more like a snarl on his reptilian features. "The human speaks as if he commands a mighty fleet," he said, his voice dripping with mockery. "Tell me, Ambassador, what can one small world possibly do against the combined military might of 1,000 civilizations?" Other aliens joined in. The laughter. The crystalline prime resonator Thulvar chimed with what sounded like amusement. Hive Commander Rixtal clicked her mandibles in what was probably the insect equivalent of chuckling, but Hyun-woo didn't seem bothered by their laughter at all. Instead, he smiled. It was a small, quiet smile, but something about it made several of the alien delegates stop laughing and pay closer attention. 72 hours, he repeated calmly. Earth's response will arrive precisely on schedule. Then, he cut the transmission. As the screen went dark, the bridge of the Harmony fell silent. Kim So-young stared at her ambassador with wide eyes. "Sir, what happens in 72 hours? Hyun-woo's smile grew slightly wider. "They find out why humanity has been so patient all these years." The countdown timer on Nexus Prime's main display showed exactly 0 hours, 0 minutes, and 0 seconds. 72 hours had passed since the human ambassador's strange promise, and nothing had happened. Many of the alien delegates were starting to think the humans had simply run away. Admiral Vexkara was pacing back and forth in his command ship, feeling quite pleased with himself. His massive dreadnought, the Stellar Dominance, was one of the largest warships in the galaxy. At 5 kilometers long, it could carry enough firepower to destroy entire planets. Around him, hundreds of other alien warships waited in formation, a show of force that should terrify any reasonable species. "Perhaps the humans have finally come to their senses," he muttered to his second-in-command, a younger Xenthan officer named Captain Rexhol. 72 hours to realize they cannot fight the entire galaxy. But even as he spoke, something felt wrong. The space around Nexus Prime seemed different somehow. The stars looked slightly blurred, as if someone had smeared them across the sky. The station's gravity generators were making odd humming noises they had never made before. On the bridge of a nearby crystal ship, Prime Resonator Thulvar was studying her instruments with growing concern. Her people were experts at detecting energy patterns, and what she was seeing made no sense at all. "The fabric of space-time is bending," she reported to her crew, her voice ringing like worried wind chimes. "Gravitational readings are climbing, beyond our instrument's ability to measure. This should not be possible." Similar reports were coming in from ships all across the sector. Insect scouts were clicking frantically as their navigation systems went haywire. Energy-based life forms were flickering in and out of visibility as unknown forces interfered with their natural frequencies. Even the mechanical races were reporting system errors they had never encountered before. Then the emergency alarm started. Every ship in the area suddenly erupted with warning sounds. Red lights flashed on 1,000 different bridges. Computer systems that had worked perfectly for centuries began displaying error messages in languages their programmers had never seen. "Oh, what is happening?" Admiral Vexkara roared at this crew. "Report!" "Sir, our sensors are detecting massive gravitational distortions," his science officer stammered. "It's as if something unimaginably heavy is trying to push its way through the barriers between dimensions." Space itself began to change. What had been empty void started to ripple like water. Colors that had no names swirled in patterns that hurt to look at directly. The very atoms in the area seemed to vibrate with barely contained energy. And then, with no warning at all, reality tore open. It wasn't like the normal hyperspace jumps that alien ships used. Those created small, neat portals that lasted for just a few seconds. This was something completely different. A massive wound in space-time opened up, stretching for dozens of kilometers in every direction. Through it, the alien fleet could see swirling energies and impossible geometries that their minds couldn't quite process. From this cosmic wound, something began to emerge. The UES Retribution came through the portal like a mountain rising from the ocean. Its nose appeared first, a sleek predatory shape that seemed to cut through space itself. Then came more of the hull, and more, and more. The alien crews watched in growing horror as they realized just how massive this human ship truly was. 50 kilometers. The battleship was 50 kilometers long from front to back. To put that in perspective, most alien dreadnoughts were considered huge at 5 kilometers. This human vessel was 10 times larger than anything in the known galaxy. But size wasn't the most frightening thing about it. The hull was made of materials that seemed to exist in several dimensions at once. Sometimes it looked solid black, absorbing all light that touched it. Other times it appeared to be made of liquid mirror, reflecting the stars in impossible ways. Strange energy patterns pulsed across its surface, like the heartbeat of some cosmic giant. Admiral Vexkara stood frozen on his bridge, staring at the human ship through his main view screen. His own massive dreadnought, which had seemed so impressive just moments before, now looked like a tiny fishing boat next to an aircraft carrier. "Impossible," he whispered. "No ship can be that large. The engineering requirements alone." But there it was, hanging in space with casual grace despite its impossible size. The human battleship didn't seem to strain against gravity or momentum. It simply existed, as if the normal laws of physics had decided to make an exception just for And across the sector, every communication channel fell completely silent. Thousands of alien vessels, from the largest battlecruisers to the smallest scout ships, just hung motionless in space. Their crews stared through their viewports at the human ship that dwarfed even the massive Nexus Prime space station. The retribution had arrived, and suddenly every alien in the galaxy understood that they had made a terrible, terrible mistake. In the sudden silence of space, one thought echoed through 1,000 different minds. What have we awakened? Captain Lee Jin-ho walked slowly across the bridge of the Retribution, his footsteps echoing softly in the vast command center. The bridge itself was larger than most alien ships, with dozens of workstations arranged in perfect geometric patterns. Holographic displays floated in the air around him, showing detailed information about every single vessel in the sector. He stopped behind Commander Choi Min-ji's station and watched as streams of data flowed across her screens. Min-ji was the ship's sensor officer, and right now she looked like a kid on Christmas morning. Her fingers danced across holographic controls as she gathered intelligence on the alien fleet. "Captain," she said, barely able to contain her excitement, "you need to see this. Our scanning systems have gone through every ship out there like they were made of paper. Their shields, their armor, their defensive systems, none of it can stop our sensors." Jin-ho nodded calmly. "What's your assessment of their technology level?" Min-ji pulled up a comparison chart that made her shake her head in amazement. "Sir, their most advanced shielding technology is roughly 400 years behind what we consider standard equipment. It's like trying to stop a modern missile with a wooden shield." Across the bridge, Lieutenant Colonel Park Sung-min was running his own analysis at the weapons station. His screen showed targeting data on hundreds of alien vessels, but what he was seeing made him smile with quiet satisfaction. "Captain," he called out, "you'll want to hear this. I've been monitoring their weapons systems, and they're trying very hard to target us right now." "And?" Jin-ho asked, though his tone suggested he already knew the answer. "They can't do it, sir. Every targeting computer in their fleet is acting like we don't exist. They're getting error messages, system failures, and complete sensor blindness. When they try to lock onto our ship," Jin-ho allowed himself a small smile. Years of preparation had led to this moment. While the aliens had been arguing about trade routes and territory disputes, humanity had been quietly developing technology that was centuries ahead of anything in the known galaxy. Meanwhile, aboard Admiral Vexkara's command ship, chaos was breaking out. The Admiral was screaming at his weapons officers, demanding to know why they couldn't target the human vessel. "Sir, the targeting systems keep giving us error messages," reported his chief gunner, a nervous young Xanthan named Lieutenant Kekstar. "Every time we try to lock onto the human ship, our computers act like there's nothing there." "Nothing there?" Vexkara roared. "It's 50 kilometers long. How can there be nothing there?" The truth was even more disturbing than they realized. The Retribution stealth systems weren't just hiding the ship. They were actively rewriting the alien computer's perception of reality. To their sensors, the massive human battleship might as well have been a ghost. On the crystal ship commanded by Prime Resonator Thulvar, the situation was equally frustrating. Her people were masters of energy manipulation, but their most sophisticated detection systems couldn't even get a proper reading on the human vessel. "The energy signatures make no sense," she chimed to her crew, her crystalline form flickering with confused patterns. "One moment our sensors detect massive power sources, the next moment they detect nothing at all. It's as if the human ship exists in multiple dimensions simultaneously." But the most dramatic scene was playing out with Hive Commander Rixtal's swarm fighters. As soon as the Retribution had appeared, her ship's automatic defense systems had kicked in. Thousands of small insect-like fighters launched from her carrier vessels, moving in perfect coordination toward the human threat. The pilots were the best in her fleet, trained from birth to fly in complex formation attacks. But as they approached the Retribution, something impossible began to happen. "Commander, our navigation systems are malfunctioning," reported one pilot, his voice clicking with panic. "I'm trying to fly toward the human ship, but my controls are steering me away." "Same here," called another pilot. "It's like the ship is gently pushing us aside." Rixtal watched in growing horror as her entire swarm, despite their pilot's best, efforts found themselves being guided away from their target. The human ship wasn't destroying them or even threatening them. It was simply making it impossible for them to approach. Back on the Retribution, Commander Choi Min-ji was monitoring the alien fighters with professional interest. "Captain, the insect swarm is trying very hard to reach us," she reported. "Our passive defense grid is redirecting them without any damage to their vessels." "Maintain current settings," Jin-Ho replied. "We're here to demonstrate superiority, not to start a massacre." The alien fleet was beginning to understand just how outmatched they were. This wasn't just a bigger ship with more guns. This was technology so advanced that it might as well have been magic. The humans could scan through their best defenses, ignore their most powerful weapons, and control their ship's movements without firing a single shot. Admiral Vexkara slumped in his command chair, staring at the massive human battleship on his screen. For the first time in his long military career, he felt truly afraid. "What are we dealing with?" he whispered to himself. The answer would come soon enough. Without any warning, every screen in the sector suddenly flickered to life. This wasn't just the main communication channels. This was everything. Personal tablets, navigation displays, entertainment systems, even the small screens inside alien bathrooms suddenly showed the same image. Across 50 light-years of space, billions of devices simultaneously displayed the face of a human man. The technical impossibility of this feat sent waves of panic through alien scientists and engineers. Broadcasting to a single star system was difficult enough, but reaching across 50 light-years instantly, that should have been absolutely impossible with any known technology. Captain Lee Jin-Ho appeared on every screen with perfect clarity. He looked to be in his early 40s, with short black hair and calm, intelligent eyes. He was wearing a simple dark blue uniform with minimal decorations, but something about his presence commanded immediate attention. When he spoke, his voice was quiet, but carried the kind of authority that made entire rooms fall silent. "Greetings," he began, and his voice reached every corner of the sector simultaneously. There was no delay, no static, no interference, just crystal-clear audio that seemed to bypass all normal communication protocols. "I am Captain Lee Jin-Ho of the United Earth Space Command. I believe you wish to discuss terms with humanity." Admiral Vexkara nearly fell out of his command chair. How was this human appearing on his private command screens? Those systems weren't even connected to external communications. They were supposed to be completely secure. "This is impossible," he muttered, staring at Jin-Ho's calm face. "Our communication systems are encrypted with quantum locks. No one should be able to break through them." But Jin-Ho continued speaking, as if he could hear the Admiral's complaints. His expression remained perfectly serene, but there was something in his dark eyes that suggested he knew far more than he was letting on. "For the past 3 centuries, Jin-Ho said, his words sending shockwaves through every alien fleet in the area, "humanity has been observing your civilizations with great interest. We have studied your technologies, analyzed your military capabilities, and carefully catalogued your strengths and weaknesses." Prime Resonator Thulvar's crystalline form began flickering rapidly, a sign of extreme distress among her people. 3 centuries, she chimed to her crew, but humans only achieved faster-than-light travel 50 years ago. How could they have been watching us for 300 years? The same question was being asked on thousands of ships across the sector. According to every piece of galactic intelligence, humans were newcomers who had just recently stumbled onto the galactic's scene. They were supposed to be primitive, backward, and completely unprepared for the complexities of interstellar civilization. Hive Commander Rixtal was clicking her mandibles in rapid, nervous patterns. Her species kept detailed records going back millennia, and there was no mention of human observers in any of their historical databases. If the humans had really been watching for 3 centuries, they had managed to do it without leaving a single trace. Captain Jin-Ho paused for a moment, as if giving the aliens time to process this revelation. When he continued, his voice carried a subtle edge that made several alien commanders unconsciously step back from their screens. "This observation period has now concluded," he announced. "We have learned everything we need to know about your capabilities, your strategies, and your intentions toward humanity. The implications were staggering. If humans had been secretly watching for 300 years, they knew everything about alien military tactics, weaknesses in their defenses, and probably the location of every major military installation in the galaxy. But Jin-Ho wasn't finished. He leaned forward slightly, and somehow this small movement made his presence feel even more commanding. "You have issued an ultimatum, demanding that humanity abandon our colonies and confine ourselves to our home system," he said, his tone remaining perfectly polite, despite the serious nature of his words. "We have considered your demands carefully, and we would like to present our counteroffer." Admiral Vexkara found himself holding his breath, waiting for the human's response. "Our terms are simple," Jin-Ho continued. "Immediately reconsider your ultimatum and withdraw your threats against human colonies. Do this now, and we can discuss a peaceful resolution to this misunderstanding." Several alien commanders began to relax slightly. Maybe the humans were going to be reasonable after all. But then Jin-Ho's expression grew slightly more serious, and his next words sent chills through every alien who heard them. "However, if you choose to maintain your hostile stance, you will discover exactly why humanity chose to reveal itself only now, after 3 centuries of patient observation." The transmission ended as suddenly as it had begun, leaving billions of screens across the sector dark and silent. But the impact of Captain Jin-Ho's words continued to echo through the alien fleets. For the first time, many of the alien commanders began to wonder if they had made a terrible mistake. Hive Commander Rixtal was not used to feeling fear. Her species had evolved from apex predators, and their entire culture was built around the concept of overwhelming enemies through sheer numbers and perfect coordination. When threatened, her people's natural response was to attack first and ask questions later. Standing on the bridge of her massive bioship, Rixtal's compound eyes reflected the image of the human battleship like thousands of tiny mirrors. Her razor-sharp mandibles clicked together in rapid, angry patterns as she processed what she had just heard. 3 centuries of observation, secret surveillance of their entire civilization. The very idea made her natural hunting instincts scream for immediate action. "This human mocks us," she hissed to her second-in-command, her voice a mixture of clicks and scraped sounds that would have been terrifying to most species. "They think they can intimidate the collective with words and one large ship." Her bridge crew, all members of her extended family group, clicked agreement. In their culture, hesitation was considered a form of weakness that could get the entire hive killed. When faced with a threat, the only logical response was to eliminate it as quickly as possible. "Launch all fighters," Rixtal commanded, her voice rising to a shriek that echoed through the bio-corridors of her ship. "Full swarm formation. Show these mammals what happens when they threaten the collective." The response was immediate and overwhelming. From dozens of insect carrier ships, small fighter craft began pouring out like angry wasps from a disturbed nest. Each fighter was a work of biological art, grown rather than built, with living hulls that could repair themselves and pilots that were literally part of the ship's nervous system. 10,000 fighters launched within minutes, moving in the kind of perfect coordination that only a hive mind species could achieve. They formed massive swirling patterns in space, each group moving in sync with all the others. It was a sight that had terrified alien races for centuries, an unstoppable tide of living ships moving with single-minded purpose. The fighters accelerated toward the retribution, their bioengines glowing with internal energy. Each pilot was bred for this moment, trained from birth to fly in perfect formation with their brothers and sisters. They had never known defeat, never experienced failure, and never encountered an enemy they couldn't overwhelm through sheer numbers. But something impossible happened when they reached exactly 1,000 kilometers from the human battleship. They stopped. Not slowed down, not turned aside. They simply stopped moving forward as if they had hit an invisible wall. The fighters' engines continued running at full power, their biohulls straining with effort, but they couldn't advance even a single meter closer to their target. "What is happening?" screamed one of the pilots, his voice transmitted directly through the hive mind link. "My ship won't respond. I'm pushing full power, but nothing is moving." "Same here," called another pilot. "It's like we're stuck in solid glass." Rixtal watched in growing horror as her entire swarm, the pride of her fleet, found themselves trapped in space like insects in amber. They were alive, they were trying to move, but some invisible force was holding them exactly 1,000 kilometers away from the human ship. On the bridge of the Retribution, Captain Lee Jin-ho observed the scene with calm professionalism. He had expected this reaction. Most aggressive species responded to demonstrations of superiority with immediate violence. It was an unfortunate but predictable pattern. "Commander Choi Min-ji," he said, his voice carrying easily across the bridges. "Communication systems, please demonstrate our defensive capabilities to the assembled fleet." Min-ji looked up from her sensor station with a slight smile. "Yes, sir. Activating passive defense grid now." She touched a single control on her holographic display, and something remarkable happened. A pulse of energy, so faint it was barely visible, emanated from the Retribution like ripples spreading across a calm pond. It moved slowly, almost gently, expanding outward in all directions. As it passed through the alien fleet, it didn't seem to do any damage at all. But appearances were deceiving. Admiral Vexkara was frantically trying to bring his weapons online when the pulse reached his ship. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then, one by one, every weapon system on his massive dreadnought simply turned off. "What?" he roared at his weapons officer. "What happened to our guns?" "Sir, all weapons are showing as offline," the terrified officer reported. "Not damaged, not destroyed, just offline. As if someone reached inside our computers and flipped a switch." The same thing was happening throughout the alien fleet. Thousands of ships found their weapon systems shutting down simultaneously. Laser cannons powered down, missile launchers sealed themselves shut, and energy weapons went completely dark. The alien crews weren't hurt. Their life support systems were still running, and their engines still worked, but they were now completely defenseless. Prime Resonator. Thulvar's crystalline form flickered with patterns of confusion and fear. "Our energy weapons are non-responsive," she chimed to her crew. "The humans have somehow accessed our core systems and disabled them remotely." The most unsettling part wasn't that their weapons had been disabled, it was how gently it had been done. The human pulse hadn't destroyed anything, hadn't hurt anyone, hadn't even caused any permanent damage. It had simply switched off their ability to fight back, as easily as turning off a light switch. Captain Jin-ho's voice carried across all communication frequencies with the same calm, gentle tone he had used throughout the encounter. "As you can. See," he said, "the Retribution is equipped with defensive systems that make aggressive action inadvisable. We hope this demonstration helps clarify the situation." In the sudden silence that followed, thousands of alien commanders realized they were facing something far beyond their understanding. Captain Lee Jin-ho stood quietly on the bridge of the Retribution, watching as his crew prepared for the most important revelation in galactic history. Around him, holographic displays were coming online, each one containing information that would change everything the alien races thought they knew about humanity. Commander Han Yujin moved gracefully between the control stations, her fingers dancing across holographic interfaces as she activated the ship's historical archives. She was Jin-ho's first officer, a brilliant woman who had spent years preparing for this exact moment. As she worked, ancient files that had been sealed for millennia began to unlock themselves. "Are the archives ready, Commander?" Jin-ho asked quietly. "Yes, sir," Yujin replied, her voice filled with quiet pride. "All historical records are online and verified. The alien fleets are about to learn who they've really been dealing with." Jin-ho nodded and stepped forward to address the alien fleet. Once again. This time, however, his transmission would include visual evidence that would shake the foundation of everything the galaxy believed about human history. "Honored delegates of the Galactic Council," he began, his voice carrying the same calm authority as before, "I believe it's time to correct a fundamental misunderstanding that has led to this unfortunate confrontation." As he spoke, holographic displays began materializing in the space around every alien ship. These weren't simple communication screens. They were three-dimensional historical reconstructions that appeared to float in the vacuum of space itself, visible to every observer. In the sector, "You seem to believe that humanity is a newcomer to galactic civilization," Jinho continued. You think we are a young, primitive species that has only recently discovered faster-than-light travel. This assumption has led you to severely underestimate our capabilities. The first holographic display showed an ancient star chart that made several alien commanders gasp in shock. The map displayed the galaxy as it had existed 12,000 years ago, but instead of the current patchwork of alien territories, nearly half of the galaxy was marked with human symbols. Admiral Vexkara stared at the floating hologram in front of his ship, his scaled hands trembling as he processed what he was seeing. Impossible, he whispered. Human civilization is barely a century old. Our historical records show no evidence of ancient human space travel. But more displays were appearing, each one showing evidence that was becoming impossible to deny. Ancient space stations with clearly human architecture, massive fleets of ships that dwarfed anything in the current galaxy, cities that covered entire planets, their design unmistakably human in origin. 12,000 years ago, Jinho explained, his voice carrying across the sector with crystal clarity, the human stellar commonwealth was the dominant power in this galaxy. We maintained peace among 1,000 different worlds, protected smaller species from aggression, and fostered technological advancement throughout known space. The holographic records showed scenes of incredible beauty and technological achievement, human cities that seemed to blend seamlessly with alien landscapes, space elevators reaching from planet surfaces to orbital stations, ships so advanced they made the current retribution look primitive by comparison. Prime Resonator. Thulvar's crystalline form was flickering rapidly as she tried to process this information. Her people kept detailed historical records going back tens of thousands of years, but there was no mention of any ancient human civilization in their archives. If this is true, she chimed to her crew, then our entire understanding of galactic history is wrong. But how is that possible? Where did all evidence of this civilization disappear to? Jinho seemed to hear her question, because his next words provided the answer that everyone was dreading. A great catastrophe struck our civilization 12 millennia ago, he said, his voice taking on a more somber tone. A threat from beyond our galaxy, something so terrible that it forced humanity to make an impossible choice. Rather than risk the destruction of all galactic life, we chose to withdraw. The holographic displays now showed scenes of incredible destruction, entire star systems going dark, massive human fleets retreating toward the galaxy's rim, ancient cities being abandoned, their populations evacuating to safer regions of space. We retreated to our homeworld and sealed ourselves away from galactic civilization, Jinho continued. For 12,000 years, we have been rebuilding, advancing our technology, and preparing for the day when we would be ready to rejoin the galactic community. Commander Han Yu-jin's voice suddenly joined the transmission, her tone carrying the precision of a military briefing. What you see before you today is not humanity's greatest achievement, she announced. The Retribution is merely the first vessel we chose to reveal. Earth's true fleet consists of thousands of ships, each one capable of pacifying entire star systems if necessary. The implications hit the alien fleet like a physical blow. They weren't dealing with newcomers who had built one impressive ship. They were facing the return of an ancient civilization that had once ruled half the galaxy, and that had spent 12,000 years preparing for their comeback. Admiral Vexkara slumped in his command chair, finally understanding the magnitude of his mistake. His empire, which he had considered one of the galaxy's great powers, was nothing compared to what humanity had once been, and apparently was again. We haven't been threatening a young species, he whispered to his crew. We've been threatening the rightful rulers of the galaxy. Admiral Vexkara sat in his command chair, staring at the holographic evidence floating in front of his ship. His scaled hands, which had commanded fleets and conquered star systems, were shaking like leaves in a storm. For the first time in his long military career, he felt truly small. The Zenthan Empire had always prided itself on having the most powerful military in the galaxy. Their dreadnoughts were legendary, their weapons technology was cutting edge, and their tactical expertise had won them victory in countless battles. Vexkara himself commanded a fleet of over 200 warships, each one a masterpiece of alien engineering. But now he realized that his entire empire's military might was nothing compared to what humanity possessed. If the Retribution was just one ship out of thousands, then the Zenthan Empire wasn't a galactic superpower. It was barely a minor regional force. "Sir," his second-in-command whispered, "what are your orders?" Vexkara couldn't answer. What orders could he give? Attack a species that had thousands of ships like the Retribution? Retreat and hope they would be forgotten? Surrender and beg for mercy? Across the sector, similar scenes were playing out on hundreds of alien vessels. Prime Resonator Thulvar, the proud leader of the Crystal Collective, watched her crystalline, body dim with despair as the full scope of humanity's power became clear. "My people," she chimed to her crew, her voice sounding like breaking glass, "we have made a terrible mistake. If what the humans say is true, then our combined fleets are. Like insects flying into a hurricane, we are not facing equals, we are facing gods who have chosen to be merciful." Her science officer, a younger crystal being named Resonator Velkan, flickered with nervous energy. "Commander, our entire civilization is based on energy manipulation and crystalline technology, but the humans' energy systems are so advanced that our sensors can't even properly analyze them." Meanwhile, Hive Commander Rixtal was experiencing something her species rarely felt: genuine fear. Her 10,000 fighters were still frozen in space, held motionless by forces she couldn't understand. Her pilots were clicking frantically through the hive mind link, begging for orders that she couldn't give. For creatures bred for war and conquest, being rendered completely helpless was almost worse than death. Her species had built their entire identity around being unstoppable in battle, but the humans had stopped them without even trying. Captain Li Jin-ho seemed to sense the despair spreading through the alien fleet. His expression, which had remained stern throughout the demonstration, softened slightly as he prepared to address them again. "I understand that this revelation has been difficult to process," he said, his voice carrying genuine sympathy. "But I want to make something very clear. Humanity does not seek conquest through destruction. We learned long ago that true strength comes from willing partnership, not forced subjugation." His words sent a ripple of surprise through the alien fleets. They had expected demands for unconditional surrender or threats of total annihilation. Instead, the human captain was talking about partnership. "We are prepared to offer alliance. Terms to any civilization wise enough to accept them," Jin-ho continued. "For your existing governments will remain in place. Your cultures will be respected and preserved. Trade will continue throughout the galaxy, though under human coordination, to ensure fairness for all species." Admiral Vexkara leaned forward in his chair, hardly daring to hope. He's offering us a way out." But Captain Jin-ho wasn't finished outlining the terms. "Furthermore, cooperative species will gain access to human technology that could advance your civilizations by centuries. Medical breakthroughs that could extend lifespans, energy systems that could power entire worlds, and transportation technology that would make current faster-than-light travel look primitive." The offer was incredibly generous, far more than any of the alien leaders had dared to hope for. They would keep their independence, their cultures, and their governments, while gaining access to technology beyond their wildest dreams. But then Commander Choi Minji's voice cut through the hopeful atmosphere like a blade. "However," she said, her tone carrying unmistakable steel beneath its polite surface, "let me be absolutely clear about one thing. Any threats against human colonies or citizens will be met with swift and final resolution. What you have witnessed today was our mercy. There will not be another demonstration. The message was unmistakable. Humanity was offering partnership to those who accepted it, but any species that chose aggression would face the full might of a civilization that had once ruled half the galaxy." One by one, the alien commanders began to understand that they really only had two choices: accept humanity's generous offer of partnership, or face irrelevance in a galaxy where humans were clearly the dominant power. The age of alien dominance was over. The age of human leadership had begun. The massive main chamber of Nexus Prime had never been so quiet. Thousands of alien delegates sat in stunned silence, processing everything they had just learned. The emergency session that had begun with plans to threaten humanity had turned into something none of them had ever expected, a complete reversal of galactic power. Admiral Vex Kara stood slowly from his seat in the Xanthan section. His legs felt unsteady, and his scaled hands were still trembling slightly, but he forced himself to walk to the center of the chamber. Every eye in the room followed him as he moved, knowing that whatever he said next would determine the future of his entire empire. For a moment, he stood in silence, looking up at the massive viewing screens that still showed the retribution floating in space like a metal mountain. His pride as a warrior wanted him to refuse, to fight against this new reality, but his wisdom as a leader told him that fighting would only lead to the destruction of everything he had sworn to protect. The Xanthan Empire, he said, his voice carrying clearly through the chamber's acoustic systems, acknowledges Earth's supremacy and formally requests alliance terms. The words seemed to hang in the air for a moment before their full impact hit the assembled delegates. The most militaristic empire in the galaxy had just submitted to human authority. If the Xanthans were surrendering, what choice did anyone else have? Prime Resonator Tulvar rose from her crystalline seating area, her entire body flickering with patterns of acceptance and resignation. When she spoke, her voice chimed like sad but beautiful music. The Crystal Collective recognizes humanity's rightful place as galactic leaders, she announced. We request inclusion in the new alliance structure. One by one, other delegates began standing and making similar declarations. The Mechanical Syndicate's representative, a being of living metal and circuits, processed the situation with cold logic and announced their immediate submission. The energy beings of the Plasma Nebula flickered their agreement in patterns of light that transcended language. Hive Commander Rixtal was among the last to speak. Her 10,000 fighters were still frozen in space, a constant reminder of humanity's overwhelming technological superiority. Her compound eyes reflected the chamber lights as she clicked her agreement. The Insect Collective yields to superior force, she announced, her mandibles clicking in patterns that indicated complete submission. We request mercy and partnership. Within 3 hours, every major galactic power had pledged cooperation with humanity's new order. Smaller civilizations quickly followed suit, not wanting to be left out of what was clearly going to be the new galactic structure. As the formal submissions continued, a new ship appeared near Nexus Prime. It was much smaller than the Retribution, sleek and elegant rather than imposing. But it wasn't alone. Surrounding it in perfect formation were a dozen other human vessels, each one clearly more advanced than anything the aliens had ever built. Ambassador Park Hyunwoo had returned, but this time he wasn't coming as a supplicant, hoping for mercy. He was arriving as the representative of the galaxy's new dominant power, escorted by a battle group that could probably conquer half the known worlds if it chose to. As his shuttle docked with Nexus Prime, something unprecedented happened. Alien dignitaries, who had once looked down on humanity as primitive newcomers, now lined the docking bay, bowing respectfully as Hyunwoo walked past. These weren't bows of defeat or humiliation. They were bows of recognition, acknowledging strength that had chosen mercy over destruction. "Welcome back, Ambassador," Admiral Vex Kara said as Hyunwoo approached. "We have much to discuss." Hyunwoo smiled the same quiet smile he had worn during their first meeting. "Indeed we do, Admiral, but this time I think our negotiations will be much more productive." Meanwhile, high above the station, Captain Lee Jin-ho was preparing for the Retribution's departure. The massive battleship's mission was complete. The galaxy now understood humanity's true position, and peaceful negotiations could begin. "Set course for Earth," he ordered his navigation officer. "It's time to report our success to command." As the Retribution began powering up its hyperspace drives, something beautiful happened. Dozens of alien vessels, from tiny scouts to massive dreadnoughts, moved into escort formation around the human battleship. They weren't being forced to do this. They were choosing to honor the ship that had shown them a better way forward. The hyperspace portal opened like a wound in reality, and the Retribution began its journey home. But it didn't travel alone. The alien escort followed it partway, a gesture of respect that would have been unthinkable just hours before. As the human ship disappeared into hyperspace, carrying news of a galaxy now united under human guidance, the alien fleet slowly dispersed. But everything had changed. The age of petty squabbles and territorial disputes was over. Humanity had returned to claim their birthright among the stars, not through conquest and destruction, but through patient wisdom and overwhelming strength tempered by mercy. They had spent 12,000 years preparing for this moment, and when Earth's battleship finally appeared, no one had dared to move against the species that had quietly reclaimed their place as the galaxy's rightful leaders. The age of human ascendancy had begun.